This is The Bad Listener with Danny Stroh.
Hey everyone, tonight I'm going to be doing Mark chapter 8, which starts with Jesus, the story of Jesus feeds 4,000. Verse 1, about this time, another large crowd had gathered and the people ran out of food again. Jesus called his disciples and told them, I feel sorry for these people. They have been here with me for 3 days and they have nothing left to eat. If I send them home hungry, they will faint along the way, for some of them have come a long distance. His disciples replied, how are we supposed to find enough food to feed them out here in the wilderness? Jesus asked, how much bread do you have? 7 loaves, they replied. So Jesus told all the people to sit down on the ground. Then he took the 7 loaves, thanked God for them, and broke them into pieces. He gave them to his disciples, who distributed the bread to the crowd. A few small fish were found too, so Jesus also blessed these and told the disciples to distribute them. They ate as much as they wanted. Afterward, the disciples picked up 7 large baskets of leftover food. There were about 4,000 men in the crowd that day, and Jesus sent them home after they had eaten. Immediately after this, he got into a boat with his disciples and crossed over to the region of Dalmanutha. So, this is a completely different miracle from the feeding of the 5,000. That's a different situation, a different story. Those were mostly Jews in the feeding of the 5,000. This was a crowd of Gentiles in the 10 towns region. So the fact that Jesus was ministering to non-Jews would have a reassuring impact on Mark's audience, which was the Romans. So basically, right, so the idea here is God is never too busy for all of your needs, right? Your heavenly Father already knows all of your needs. That's Matthew 6:32. God is not too busy with important concerns. He's aware of all your needs, and nothing is too large for him to handle, and there is no need too small to escape his interest, right? So like in this situation, right, we think that, okay, this is kind of something where, they need food. They're not sure what to do, right? But Jesus has no problem doing this miracle at all. But in our lives, it doesn't have to be something huge, right? It could be something smaller, right? It could be anything that we need. There's nothing that he's not going to want to help you with. He's never too busy. Nothing's never not too important, right? However big or small your need is, you pray to God and he listens and he'll take care of it, right? It's kind of, the idea here of him helping these people. So the disciples had already seen Jesus feed a crowd of 5,000, right, through miracles, yet they still question how he'd feed this crowd of 4,000. You say, throughout the Bible, they're always amazed at every miracle, even after he just did a miracle, right? It's like, why couldn't they understand his power, right? But we do the same thing today. I think, we may have seen Jesus help us through our trials and hard times, but then we don't think he'll help us in the future, right? We'll be doubtful that we can get his help again. And I think we just need to have an open heart and trust that Jesus will always be there to help us, right? I mean, we have to remember like what he has done and have faith that he will continue to be here for us and help us with whatever we need, right? But yeah, I find myself doing that all the time where it's like I'll see him do unbelievable things in my life, right? I'll pray for something, and then still even, right, after that, there's always like something in the back of my head where it's like, is he really going to do this again? Like type of thing. Is he really going to help me again? but yeah, I mean, he almost, it's, never fails. Like, so he's always going to be there to help you. So, you just have to have the faith, right? It's all about having faith when you pray to God, when you pray to Jesus, to have the faith that he is going to help you in whatever way and whatever you're asking for, no matter how impossible it seems or how big of a miracle it would have to be. The faith is what determines whether he helps you, right? If you have faith in him, he will help you. He'll do whatever you need him to do. You know what I mean? In your life. So verse 6, so Jesus told the people to go sit down on the ground. Then he took the 7 loaves, thanked God for them, and broke them into pieces. So Jesus gave thanks for the food, right? That's a model for us. We should always thank Jesus for the food we have. But life is a gift as well, right? As what nourishes life, right? It's a material blessing. Mealtime is an opportunity to thank God for everything, right? Our daily needs that are met, taste and human company, divine companionship. I mean, eating together shouldn't be a bothersome interruption. We should all pray and thank God before meals. I mean, it's something that's just easy to do because you're all sitting down together. Just showing genuine gratefulness to God. I think to get into a habit of just praying to God with your family or your, whoever you're eating with at the time, you're able to break bread together and pray to God. I mean, as a group, as a family, whoever you're with, it's a great habit to get into, and it's just it's very easy. It's a very easy habit to get into because you're sitting down. You're with people you love, and it's not a hard thing. So it's a great habit to try to get into that. Jesus did it to show us that we should be doing it. All right, so let's go into the next one. Leaders demand a miraculous sign. Verse 11, when the Pharisees heard that Jesus had arrived, they came and started to argue with him. Testing him, they demanded that he show them a miraculous sign from heaven to prove his authority. When he heard this, he sighed deeply in his spirit and said, why do these people keep demanding a miraculous sign? I tell you the truth, I will not give this generation any such sign. So he got back into the boat and left them, and he crossed to the other side of the lake. So what happens here is the Pharisees try to explain away all of Jesus' previous miracles, saying it was luck, coincidence, or evil power, right? It was all the excuses they came up with, right? So here they demanded a sign from heaven, but Jesus knew this wouldn't convince them either, right? No matter what, they're not going to say, okay, we believe you, you're the Son of God. He knows this already. So they'd already made up their minds about him, right? So the idea is like that their hearts can be so hard that there's nothing that will change them. But, that's the whole reason why, and this is the whole reason why Jesus gets up and leaves them, right? There's no point in him taking a miraculous sign from giving them some type of miraculous sign, because he knows it's not going to do anything. What would be the point of it, right? Because I think when you first read this, like, well, why didn't he just give him a miraculous sign and try to prove to them he's the Son of God? And at this point, he knew there was really nothing that he could say to change their hardened hearts. And they were just trying to scheme of ways to make him look bad or to expose him as some type of false prophet or whatever. So trying to show him some miracle wouldn't really have helped him at all. So that's kind of why he leaves there. So the next story is Jesus warns against wrong teaching. Verse 14, but the disciples had forgotten to bring any food. They only had 1 loaf of bread with them in the boat. As they were crossing the lake, Jesus warned them, watch out, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and of Herod. At this, they began to argue with each other because they hadn't brought any bread. Jesus knew what they were saying, so he said, "Why are you arguing about having no bread? Don't you know or understand even yet? Are your hearts too hard to take it in? You have eyes, can't you see? You have ears, can't you hear? Don't you remember anything at all? When I fed the 5,000 with 5 loaves of bread, how many baskets of leftovers did you pick up afterwards? 12, they said. And when I fed the 4,000 with 7 loaves, how many large baskets of leftovers did you pick up? 7, they said. Don't you understand yet? He asked them. So, in the beginning here, watch out, beware of the yeast of the Pharisees and of Herod. So this reference to Herod, it's probably for like the supporters of Herod, right? It's a group of Jews who supported the king. Many of the supporters of Herod were also the Sadducees. So the yeast in this passage symbolized evil, right? Only a little yeast is needed to make the bread rise, right? The hard-heartedness of political and spiritual leaders can contaminate an entire population, right? That little bit of evilness, right? It spreads quickly and can just contaminate everything, that poison the well, more or less, right? So 17, Jesus knew what they were saying. Why are you arguing about having no bread? So hard hearts hinder your faith in God and his power, right? People with hard hearts today struggle with the same issues and come to these conclusions, right? That poverty is always caused by laziness, and helping the poor is enabling them. Worship is best conducted in one way, my way. It's worked my whole life. Jesus' command to make disciples doesn't apply to us. People will never change anyway. You have to listen to Jesus' questions to avoid being hard-hearted, right? You have to be open to God's truth. It's full of grace and mercy and understanding. Yeah. People do this today, right? With certain things, right? The hard-heartedness of just saying that, you can't change people, helping people isn't really helping people. It's like all these things are kind of just like excuses. So you don't have to really do what you should be doing, right? That's that hard-heartedness that they speak of here. Are your hearts too hard to take it in? So it's a kind of dangerous way to live. It's a stubbornness is what it is. It's a stubbornness to open up your heart and kind of understand that you only get to these places through love and not through whatever your way is or whatever you think is correct, right? All right, we'll go into the next story. Jesus restores sight to a blind man. Verse 22, when they arrived at Bethsaida, some people brought a blind man to Jesus, and they begged him to touch the man and heal him. Jesus took the blind man by the hand and led him out of the village. Then, spitting on the man's eyes, he laid his hands on him and asked, "Can you see anything now?" The man looked around. "Yes," he said, "I see people, but I can't see them very clearly. They look like trees walking around." Then Jesus placed his hands on the man's eyes again, and his eyes were opened. His sight was completely restored, and he could see everything clearly. Jesus sent him away, saying, "Don't go back into the village on your way home." So the question here that everybody always has is, why did Jesus have to touch the blind man a second time to fully heal him? Why couldn't he have just healed him on the first touch? He's got the power of God. So the idea here is like he wanted to show that some healing might be gradual, right? That's the one thing. The other thing is to demonstrate that spiritual truth is not always perceived clearly at first. So the spiritual truth may seem kind of blurry, not clear for like it's the idea of when you're entering the faith, right? Is everything is kind of blurry and it takes a while to see clearly. It takes a while to be able to see everything the way that it's meant to be seen. So I think that's the second reason why he does that there. All right, we'll go into the next story. Peter says Jesus is the Messiah. Verse 27, Jesus and his disciples left Galilee and went up to the villages near Caesarea Philippi. As they were walking along, he asked them, who do people say I am? Well, they replied, some say John the Baptist, some say Elijah, and others say you are one of the other prophets. Then he asked them, but who do you say I am? Peter replied, you are the Messiah. But Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. So but who do you say I am? You are the Messiah, right? So Jesus asked, well, I'll start off by giving the background. So Caesarea Philippi was a pagan city known for its worship of Greek gods and its temples devoted to the ancient god Pan, right? So this is a fitting place for Jesus to ask his disciples to recognize him as the Son of God, right? So Jesus asked who the other people thought he was, and then he asked who the disciples thought he was. And it's important to have your understanding of who Jesus is, regardless of what other people may think. He is the Christ, the Messiah, the Son of God, the one anointed by God to rescue us from the deadly consequences of sin for all eternity, right? To get this realization, though, you must move from curiosity to commitment, right? From admiration to adoration, right? A lot of people admire Jesus as a teacher who taught a lot of great things, but you have to basically adore him as the Son of God, right? That's the adoration part of that, right? People are curious about the Bible and Jesus, but you have to commit yourself, right? You have to commit yourself to reading the Bible, learning about Jesus, and knowing the whole story, right? So in verse 30, but Jesus warned them not to tell anyone about him. So Jesus warns his disciples not to tell anybody about him. He knows they need a better understanding of him and his message that they will only receive through his death and resurrection. They knew he was the Messiah, but still didn't completely know what that meant or what he was sent to do, right? Sometimes we talk to Christians who identify as saved, but don't have a full understanding of Jesus and his teachings. It feels like it happens all the time. It is our job to help reinforce their beliefs and help them to fully understand everything Jesus stands for through a one-on-one conversation, Bible study, or some type of meeting, whatever it is. But the idea here is that he tells them not to tell anyone about him because they need to understand better, right? They don't really understand why he's there yet. Like they kind of understand, all right, you're the Son of God, but they still don't understand his real plan, right? He talks about different things that they don't really know where he's going with everything, right? They understand his teachings and he explains it to them, but as far as where this whole thing is going, they still don't really get it, right? He hasn't died and been resurrected yet, right? That's the plan that they don't really get, and they won't really get the whole picture until after he dies on the cross and is resurrected. So that's why he kind of like, all right, let's just hold off on this for a little bit and then we'll get back to it. All right, we'll go into the next story. Jesus predicts his death the first time, verse 31. Then Jesus began to tell them that the Son of Man must suffer many terrible things and be rejected by the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of religious law. He would be killed, but 3 days later he would rise from the dead. As he talked about this openly with the disciples, Peter took him aside and began to reprimand him for saying such things. Jesus turned around and looked at his disciples, then reprimanded Peter. "Get away from me, Satan," he said. "You are seeing things merely from a human point of view, not from God's." Then, calling the crowd to join his disciples, he said, "If any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your cross, and follow me. If you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you will save it. And what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul? Is anything worth more than your soul? If anyone is ashamed of me and my message in these adulterous and sinful days, the Son of Man will be ashamed of that person when he returns in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. So verse 31, then Jesus begins to tell them about the Son of Man must suffer many terrible things and be rejected by the elders, the leading priests, and the teachers of religious law. So the Son of Man, right? That name, the Son of Man, is Jesus' most common title for himself. In Daniel 7:13, the Son of Man is a heavenly figure who has authority and power in the end times. So this refers to Jesus as a Messiah, which is linked closely with Peter's confession of Jesus as the Christ and confirms its messianic significance. From this point on, Jesus spoke plainly and directly to his disciples about his death and resurrection. He began to prepare them for what would happen to him by telling them 3 times, right? This is the first time. And yeah, I it's funny that he wants them to try to not be so surprised when he is wound up killed. And I think that the idea is that they believe he's going to be this king who's going to rule over and save them from the Romans, and the whole him dying thing is his explanation, trying to get through to them, right? It's why he does this a little bit. But when you get into where is it? As he talked about this, only so Peter took him aside and reprimanded him. Jesus turned around, looked at the disciples, "Get away from me, Satan." So Peter was not considering God's purposes, but only his own natural human desire and feelings. Right? Like, you have to understand they can't really understand what he's talking about, the whole death thing, right? They wanted Jesus to be king and not a suffering servant, right? That's from the suffering servant from Isaiah 53. He wanted the glory for following the Messiah, but not the persecution, right? Christian life is not a paved road to wealth and ease. It often involves hard work and persecution, deprivation, deep suffering, right? We got to focus on the good that God can bring out of apparent evil. And you have to remember the resurrection follows the crucifixion. So the idea is there's going to be tough times, there's going to be persecution, but there's always a light at the end. Like, there's always a reason, there's always a light. Like, God is always just. As long as you keep following him and you don't give up faith, and you always have faith in him, there will always be a light at the end of the tunnel, a means to the end. There will always be glory at the end of the road, right? So that's kind of like what they can't really understand here, is because they don't really understand that he's going to die, be crucified and resurrect. So for him to, for Jesus to start talking about killed and being resurrected, and it just sounds crazy to them. And that's why, Peter kind of starts to reprimand him, right? So Peter was often the spokesman for all the disciples. Jesus was indirectly addressing all the disciples here. I know a lot of people are like, "Oh, you reprimanded Peter," but Peter was kind of just the patsy here. He kind of spoke for everybody. They were unknowingly here trying to prevent him from going to the cross, right? And the similarity is Satan also tempted Jesus to avoid the cross, right? When he offered him, basically the whole world for, his soul or whatever. So Satan's intentions were evil, right? Obviously Satan's evil, but the disciples were doing it out of love and admiration. They didn't want him to die. That's the whole thing. It's not like they knew he had to die for our sins and be resurrected. So they were doing it because, they loved him, and they didn't want to see him go. And, the stuff he was saying sounds super morbid to them, that he was going to die and, come back to life or whatever. But the disciples' job weren't to guide and protect Jesus, right? They were supposed to follow Jesus. So the scenario, I think a lot of the times they feel like they have to kind of like be his manager type, when the idea is like they're just the students, they're just the followers. They're not supposed to tell him that he's saying something wrong, right? He's the son of God, like he can't say anything wrong, right? He's, you know, he knows all. So it's only after the death and resurrection where they fully understand what he's saying here, when they fully understand the big picture of what was going on. Yeah, but it wasn't what they were doing. It wasn't like mean or anything like that. It wasn't like they were trying to say that, you know, he was wrong or doing something evil. The idea was that they were trying to protect him. Like they were, hey, you know, stop saying this. You're not going to die. Like, and then in 34, then calling the crowd to join the disciples. If any of you wants to be my follower, you must give up your own way, take up your own cross, and follow me. Right. So, Mark's writing this to the Romans, right? The Romans understood what taking up the cross meant, the form of execution by Rome. The prisoners would carry their cross to the place of crucifixion. So carrying the cross was the ultimate submission required by his followers, right? Heroic effort needed to follow him moment by moment to do his will when the work is difficult and there's no immediate rewards in sight, right? Taking up the cross will require sacrifice and possibly pain, but leads to a life with a new level of appreciation for Jesus and service to others, right? So this idea of taking up your cross is, listen, it's you got to be prepared for the worst, right? It's not going to be easy. There's going to be, it's a hard, it's a hard thing to commit yourself to something, right? Especially these guys in this time. Obviously things are a little bit different now, but in that time, like they kind of knew that they were going to be, you know, a lot of them potentially could have been crucified after Jesus for spreading the news of the gospel, right? Spreading the news about Jesus. So this whole taking up your crossing was Jesus trying to kind of prepare them, like, listen, you want to be a follower, you got to be prepared to be crucified, like type of thing, because he knew that they were going to be, you know, they were going to be in trouble after he leaves and they start spreading the word. So, but the idea is, right, like verse 35, if you try to hang on to your life, you will lose it. But if you give up your life for my sake and for the sake of the good news, you will save it. So we should be willing to lose our lives for the sake of the good news. Not even life itself can compare to what we gain when we follow Jesus, right? Jesus wants us to choose to follow him instead of leading a life of sin and self-satisfaction. He wants us to stop trying to control our own destinies and let him direct us, right? Jesus knows better than we do, you know, what real life is about. So he's asking for submission, not self-hatred. He asks us to lose our self-centered determination to be in charge, right? That's the whole surrendering. We have to surrender our life to him and let him be in charge. Trying to do things on your own, it's not going to work, right? We have to let him direct us, right, for what he wants. We have to be the suffering servant now, right? It's our role. We are his servant, so we're at his will, right? He knows the best decisions we could possibly make, so let's let him make those decisions, right? Let's see. We get into 36, and what do you do if you what do you benefit if you gain the whole world but lose your own soul, right? So kind of looking back to what the devil, and Satan, right? Satan and Jesus, right? When he offers him the whole world for his soul. That was after the 40 days and 40 nights of fasting in the wilderness, right? So he's kind of referencing that a little bit here, right? Well, the idea is many people spend all their energy seeking pleasure, right? That temporary pleasure, right? The worldliness, possessions, position, power, but they're ultimately worthless, right? They're not going to get you anywhere in the end. whatever you have on earth is temporary. It can't be exchanged for your soul. So it doesn't really matter, right? If you work hard at getting what you want, it might seem like you have a satisfying life, but eventually you will find that your life is hollow and empty, right? We have to make the pursuit of God more important than the pursuit of pleasure, right? The idea is that pursuing God is more rewarding than any pursuit of some temporary pleasure, right? It's kind of all just like a mirage, right? Like we all think that all this money and power, fame, whatever is going to make us happy in the end. And it's really not. You're going to get there and realize that it's not really satisfying. Like the things that really make you happy in life, you didn't pay attention to, right? It was, you could have turned to God and God would have made you happy over and over again every day through, things that really mean something, right? Helping other people and just loving family and stuff like that is just so much more rewarding than anything money can buy you. It's, again, you waste your whole life chasing things that in the end are just worthless. So, I mean, the idea is if you follow Jesus, right, you'll know what it means to live abundantly now and ultimately to have eternal life, right? In the end. A lot of people don't like to just kind of ignore what happens when you die type of thing, but eventually you're going to have to come to some conclusion and have some conversation with yourself about what's going to happen when you die. And if you're willing to take the risk and go to hell instead of just having an extremely happy life following God, then it's your decision. But, follow Jesus now and everything will just start getting better and you really won't have to worry about the afterlife anymore. It's, almost look forward to it. All right. Let's see. 38, verse 38. If anyone is ashamed of me and my message in these adulterous, sinful days, the Son of Man will be ashamed of that person when he returns in the glory of his Father with the holy angels. So he presents a choice, right? We can reject Jesus now and be rejected by him at his second coming, or we can accept him now and be accepted by him then, right? Rejecting him may help us escape shame for the time being, but it will guarantee an eternity of shame later, is basically what he's saying here, right? Listen, like the day of judgment's going to come, and when the day of judgment comes, what do you want God to think of you? Do you want, God to love you and be proud of you, or do you want, God to be ashamed of you, right? That's like just the whole theory of giving yourself up to God, right? There's nothing worth more than your soul, right? In the end. Yeah. So, I mean, the idea here is when he returns in the glory of his Father with the holy angels, you don't want him to be ashamed of you. So don't be ashamed of him. Well, him now is what they were saying then, but even in our times, don't be ashamed to be a follower of Jesus Christ. Because you don't want him to be ashamed of you, right? It's kind of how it works. All right. That concludes chapter 8. And we'll do chapter 9 next time. But thank you for listening and have a blessed night.